Good evening. A mounting death toll and COVID cases at a record high. Tonight, Sydney is facing an escalating crisis. 5 people have died in the past 24 hours, and now the virus is spreading north, forcing more than 500,000 residents in the Hunter region into lockdown.
The Sydney Basin is no longer a coronavirus prison. Delta has jumped the walls and made the trip up the M1, plunging Newcastle and the Hunter into lockdown.
There hasn't been much in Newcastle, and it'd be nice to keep it that way.
A 7-day stay-at-home order under the same rules as Greater Sydney, as a cluster of 5 cases threatens the safety of 630,000 people.
It doesn't surprise me. It was always going to happen.
It's no good. What can you do? How can you stop everyone? You can't watch everyone, can you?
The cluster is believed to have been sparked by a teenager from Western Sydney who drove up to a party at Blacksmiths Beach in Lake Macquarie on Friday and infected their friends.
I also want people to tell us the truth. If they've made a wrong judgment, if they've taken a course of action that they regret, please tell us the truth.
The infected students ended up going to school across Lake Munmora, Maitland and Morisset. A panicked Premier not hesitating this time around, casting the net wide with Newcastle, Cessnock, Lake Macquarie, Maitland, Port Stephens, Muswellbrook and Dungog all locked down.
We are very concerned about regional New South Wales, and that's why we've got some of those protections in place.
The state's cases just continue to rise. 262, at least 45 sick in the community. But today was sadly marked with death. 5 people succumbing to COVID in 24 hours.
There was a man in his 60s who died in Campbelltown Hospital. He was tested positive on the July 29th. There was a man in his 70s who died at Concord Hospital, and he tested positive on July 20th. There was a man who died in Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, and there was also the lady in her 80s who died at Liverpool Hospital, and the other gentleman in his 60s died at Westmead Hospital.
None of them were fully vaccinated.
One person had 1 dose of AstraZeneca, so again, no one who's died has had both doses of the vaccine.
The speed of Delta is leaving testers and tracers under the pump. Hardy's Wyoming aged care home at Summer Hill is continuing to record new cases. 28 people now infected in the Christmas in July cluster. While on day 2 of 2 weeks home arrest in this Campbelltown unit block, 12 people now have the virus across 8 households.
The virus doesn't move by itself. People staying at home ensures that the virus doesn't move.
But the Hunter's first lockdown in 18 months saw Novocastrians flood Woolies. Panic returning to a region which had hoped it had seen the back of the pandemic.
I was in a line this morning for an hour for myself, and now almost 2 hours here.
We will not get through this unless we see higher rates of vaccination.
To help with that, 180,000 Pfizer doses will be fast-tracked to New South Wales from Monday and will help replenish the doses redirected to vaccinate Year 12 students, ironically from the Central Coast and Hunter.
Those 20,000 doses in New South Wales of Pfizer have to go back into those regional communities.
A key priority of our government is to make sure that every student can sit the HSC.
Without proper compliance, lockdown will march on well into spring. Soldiers and police helping keep people fed and watered while making sure they're home isolating when they're supposed to be.
Chris is with me in the studio. Chris, you have breaking news on big delays at Westmead Hospital.
Peter, 2 COVID-positive patients have been stuck in ambulances outside Westmead Hospital today. The wait is unbelievable. One had to wait 7 hours, the other 4 hours, because the volume of patients in the hospital meant the 2 people could not be admitted. Now, I've spoken to New South Wales Health, who have admitted that there was a problem. They say the people were treated properly, but the wait was obviously unacceptable. It shows how much stress, Peter, our health system is currently under.
It sure does. Chris, thank you. Let's go to Lauren Tomasi. She's in Gateshead, just south of Newcastle tonight. Lauren, what's the feeling on the ground there this evening?
Pete, there's certainly a feeling of frustration among locals that this virus has managed to make its way into their community. But that said, people are really trying to do the right thing. They have turned out in droves today to get tested right across the region. At this drive-through testing clinic alone, staff tell me they've done in excess of 1,000 swabs today. And while things have quietened down now, they say if people keep turning up, then they will be here to keep on testing them. Now, I have spoken to health officials this evening who tell me they will now look at putting in additional testing clinics along with extending testing hours to help meet the demand. Pete?
Lauren, thank you. Tragically, there was another death today related to this outbreak. A 34-year-old woman has died after receiving the AstraZeneca vaccine. Liz Daniels is with me. Liz, she suffered from very rare blood clots.
Pete, the chances are so rare it makes the loss all the more tragic. The 34-year-old had received her first dose of AstraZeneca and was diagnosed with this rare blood clotting condition. Sadly, yesterday she passed away. It's the 7th death linked to the vaccine. 6.8 million doses have been given in Australia, and we are seeing more take-up of the vaccine among young people as Sydney struggles to cope with this outbreak. Dying from this rare side effect is a 1 in a million risk, but it is a risk causing significant vaccine hesitancy. Pete, in comparison, 1 in 35 COVID-19 patients in Australia eventually succumbs to the disease.
All right, Liz, thank you. Victoria will go into a snap 7-day lockdown from 8 o'clock tonight after 6 new cases emerged, most with no known link. Premier Dan Andrews says he wants to prevent an outbreak like Sydney's. It's Victoria's 6th lockdown. Meantime, Queensland has recorded 16 community cases, all linked to a school cluster. This outbreak has claimed 21 lives and many victims have become critically ill with little warning. Tonight, an intensive care doctor describes how dangerous and unpredictable the virus can be and why it sometimes proves fatal.
We've already witnessed the frightening reality of patients in intensive care struggling to breathe.
Those patients will be experiencing potentially air hunger, and obviously we address that as fast as possible.
It all starts here. When the virus enters the nose and mouth, it invades the cells and uses them to multiply rapidly. Most people's immune system can fight it, but in about 20% of patients, the virus spreads down the lungs, deep into the air sacs. As immune cells attack, fluid and pus build up, clogging the airways, causing respiratory distress.
About 60% of patients then required to go on to mechanical ventilation. And by that I mean they needed an endotracheal tube placed in their windpipe.
When a patient needs a machine to breathe, they're placed on their stomach for extra support, but their fate is unpredictable. The lack of oxygen into the tissues can cause the liver, heart, kidneys and intestines to malfunction.
So if you went on to mechanical ventilation, the mortality was as high as around 23%. That mortality is substantially lower than that experienced in other countries.
The body's own immune cells can become hyperactive, wreaking havoc and causing inflammation, triggering blood clots, a stroke or heart attack. That can happen quite suddenly. Doctors can only do so much. Vaccinations, though, can prevent these tragic turn of events.
Minimises the severity of the disease in many cases and certainly decreases mortality.
Gabriella Rogers, 9 News.
Struggling Sydney businesses are being reassured that delays in accessing financial help will be resolved. But in a further slap, those approved to receive payments are only getting part of the money, the rest held up by red tape.
For the crew at Chippendale's Lord Gladstone Hotel, this lockdown feels tougher than ever.
Just laying off the staff, the whole unknown of not knowing what's around the corner.
Instead of their usual 13 staff, now it's just Mitch Bain, his head chef and bar manager, doing what they can to tick over. It doesn't come close to covering costs. They've qualified for help, $15,000, but so far just $10,500 has come through.
That money's already gone, that's already been sucked up with other things paid for.
As for the rest, held up by Treasury bureaucracy. For Joe Popovich, his Bondi Trat is all locked up, 24 staff laid off. The fraction of the grant he's received will barely cover bills, but allows him to reopen for takeaways next week.
Just to see if we can get that little bit of extra revenue coming through to help out our staff and regain some of our staff.
As for our clubs, they've now laid off nearly 25,000 staff and are currently losing $70 million a week.
We have hundreds of clubs that are now closed down and they are burning through their savings, and if this continues much longer, we are concerned for the viability of many clubs.
They're asking to reopen in a COVID-safe way, saying government handouts are helpful but simply not enough. After almost 7 weeks in lockdown, it'll be little comfort that the Premier has asked those seeking help to be patient, promising that systems will start improving from tomorrow. This after her Treasurer, Finance and Customer Services ministers all pointed at each other as being responsible for the problems.
I'm the Premier, the buck stops with me, and it's my job to make sure things are as efficient as possible.
Eddie Meyer, 9 News.